How do you generate ideas for an informative essay? In this lesson, you will learn how to generate ideas for an informative essay by selecting and organizing relevant information. Let's review. We're writing in response to a piece of literature. Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, is a nonfiction narrative about the author's life. Frederick Douglass was a slave who learned to read. As a result, he developed a new perspective about slave owners and his life as a slave. Let's look at the prompt. Frederick Douglass had the opportunity to interact with many people. Examine the text closely. How was Frederick's life impacted by these other characters? Write an informative essay to convey your ideas about this question. Let's review the writing process. When asked to respond to a writing prompt involving a piece of literature, the first step is always to read the text closely and analyze its contents. It is helpful to make notes about your thinking as you read. Step 2 is to generate ideas and plan the writing. Step 3 is draft and revise. And step 4 is where we edit and publish our final product. In this lesson, we will be focusing on step 2, generating and planning the essay. There are some things to keep in mind. First, writing in response to literature requires careful and thoughtful reading of a text. When we start the writing process, we begin by generating ideas. And in the case of writing in response to literature, we have to let the text guide decisions. There are 3 steps in our core lesson. Step 1, start with a clear picture of your topic and purpose for writing. Step 2, examine your notes and the text. Ask yourself, what information from the text is relevant to my topic? Jot down this information. Step 3, evaluate the results of your information gathering. Ask yourself, which pieces of text evidence most strongly support my topic? Make note of your decisions. Let's begin with step 1. Start with a clear picture of your topic and purpose for writing. When I look back at the prompt, I realize that I really need to know first, what is my topic? And I can see that here in this question. How was Frederick's life impacted by these other characters? I also need to have a clear purpose for writing. I can see that in the last sentence where I'm told to write an informative essay. So my task is to write an informative essay telling how Frederick was impacted by other characters in the story. Now I can move on to step 2. Examine your notes and text. Ask yourself, what information from the text is relevant to my topic? Jot down this information. So the first question that I need to think about is, with whom did Frederick interact? I can look back at the notes I made about the characters. In addition to Frederick, Master and Mistress Hugh are in the story. There is also mention of poor white kids who are referred to as street urchins. There are many references to characters Frederick read about in a book called The Columbian Orator. These include another slave and his master, as well as a famous speechmaker named Sheridan. I think I should include these 3 because Frederick read about them over and over again, and I remember him writing about what he learned from reading about them. And finally, there were 2 Irishmen that Frederick met on a wharf. Now that I've identified the characters with whom Frederick interacted, I need to choose one of them and examine the text to locate information that will help me explain how that character impacted Frederick's life. I remember that there were only vague references to Master Hugh, so I can just ignore him. I will start by looking for evidence about Mistress Hugh because there were very specific details about how she interacted with Frederick. So now I need to examine the text for specific details to show how Mistress Hugh interacted with Frederick. I can add these details to notes in a bit. I notice four things in this portion of text. Mistress Hugh commenced to instruct Frederick. She ceased to instruct him. She got angry with him when she saw him with a newspaper. And this last part might be important to use because it says her actions revealed her apprehension about Frederick reading. So now I will jot down these 4 points to use later when I begin drafting my essay. So she commenced to instruct, she ceased to instruct, she got angry to see him with a newspaper and she snatched it away. And also, this last part, it revealed her apprehension, which means that she thought it was dangerous for him to read a newspaper. In this next portion, I noticed that Mistress Hugh narrowly watched Frederick. It says that she suspected him of having a book, and there's this quote at the end that's very interesting. Mistress, in teaching me the alphabet, had given me the inch, and no precaution could prevent me from taking the L. This basically means that by teaching Frederick the alphabet, Mistress Hugh kindled the flame of learning inside Frederick, and once that flame was lit, nothing could stop him from learning more. I think that might be significant, so I want to make notes again. Mistress Hugh narrowly watched Frederick. She suspected him of having a book. And then there's this quote that I might be able to use in some way. The idea that she had given him the inch and nothing could stop him from taking the L. Now that I have identified and recorded what I think are relevant details about the interaction between Mistress Hugh and Frederick, I need to move on to step 3. Evaluate the results of my information gathering and ask which pieces of text evidence most strongly support my topic, and then I need to make note of my decisions. So I'm going to look back at my notes and I'm going to make a decision about the ones that are the best to support my thinking. So when I look back, I notice all of the notes that I made. Although there are several details here, it seems like there are only 2 that are strongly related to the idea that Mistress Hugh had a lasting impact on the life of Frederick Douglass. The first is the fact that she started to teach Frederick to read, and the second is the quote where Frederick himself credits Mistress Hugh with lighting the fire of learning within him. The quote even says that nothing could stop it once it started. I want to be very sure that I include both of these pieces of text evidence in my essay. So I am thinking I need to find relevant evidence about other characters in the story. So I will go back and use this same process for finding evidence related to how other characters impacted the life of Frederick Douglass. When I've gathered all of my ideas together, I'll be ready to move on to the next step and draft my essay. Let's review the steps in our lesson. Step 1, start with a clear picture of your topic and purpose for writing. Step 2, examine your notes and the text. Ask yourself, what information from the text is relevant to my topic? Jot down this information. Step 3, evaluate the results of your information gathering. Ask yourself, which pieces of text evidence most strongly support my topic? Make note of your decisions. In this lesson, you have learned how to generate ideas for an informative essay by selecting and organizing relevant information.